Welcome, everyone. We're here for another episode of Garner Station Podcast, the Town of Garner's podcast. My name's Rick Mercier. We're here in full bloom coffee and craft on Main Street in historic downtown Garner, and we have with us today Joe Giglio, journalist. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you got my last name right.
Sports,
You passed the first test.
long time sports journalist with the NNO. You'll recognize his byline if you follow NC State sports and I guess other sports over the years. And we're happy to have him with us. He happens to be a Garner resident and involved in the community. His family is here and involved in the community. And we're going to talk a bit about Garner and of course, sports and sports journalism and the state of sports journalism. So let's get started. Joe, how long have you been doing sports journalism?
So when I got to NC State, I played sports my whole life. And, all through high school. You get to college, you're at NC State, like I wasn't that good.
Yeah.
So I had nothing, I didn't have anything to play anymore. So I figured I should write about it. And I started at the school paper there, technician. And it's really just been a process since then. So that was 94. Yeah. So I've been following NC State sports or writing about them since 94.
Wow.
And then I started at the NNO in 95 as a part-time agate clerk. Agate is the small type.
Tell us what that is.
Yeah.
That people listening aren't going to know that.
No,
maybe.
agate is small type.
Yep.
Okay, so it was the box scores.
Box scores, yep, standings, that type of stuff.
And we used to run all that. We don't run any of that anymore.
Yeah.
So somebody had to put the Major League Baseball box scores, the NBA summaries, NFL. Yeah. Back then we did ACC stats by hand. Mm-hmm. The other stuff was off the AP wire, but the ACC stuff you had to put in by hand. The high school stuff, you had to answer the phone, put it in, So really as low of a position as you can have at a newspaper, maybe other than delivering it. But that's how I started in December of 95. So 24 years. Am I getting my math right?
That is,
right here.
Coming up on it, yeah.
Yeah, this next month will be 24 years.
2020. Who were the sports, the reporters, the journalists, the editors there at the time who you worked with? There's probably some names folks will recognize.
Well, Carlton Tudor was the sports columnist for the NNO, Raleigh Times First, NNO, forever. Yeah. And it was an institution in North Carolina sports journalism. It was in the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame for that reason. And he was my mentor. And he passed away 2 years ago. And I couldn't have asked for someone to learn better, just the whole process. Not so much about writing, but kind of understanding, because he had a very unique way of writing, but it was more of how to cover teams, how to treat people who you're covering, and don't write anything you couldn't say to somebody was one of his rules for me too. So, and to understand, you're not going to please all the people all the time. Yeah. But if you're honest and you treat everyone the same way, then people will, kind of come to respect that and understand where you come from. So he was the best. AJ Carr was a writer there forever. AJ's working with the Hall of Fame now, actually. AJ's easily the nicest person in the world. Him and Tim Stevens, another Garner guy. Tim are really, really nice guys. And Tim, tireless worker on high school sports for almost as long, or if not longer than Tudor. Again, we just had so many people like that. Tim, AJ, Chip Alexander, Bill Woodward, another guy who lives here in Garner. We got a lot of Garner connections at the NNO. When I first got there, it's so much different now. It's so different. I'm probably one of the oldest people at the paper now at 45. Yeah. Whereas back then you had a whole nother layer of institutional knowledge. It's just amazing kind of how the whole dynamic has changed.
Yeah. So how did you jump from, putting agate on the page to getting to write? What was your start?
So Tim let me cover some high school games. I did some football, did some basketball, did some track. But mostly at that time, our staff was much bigger, but it was also, hey, we need someone to go write about not the hockey game, but the wives or the people at the airport, when the team would come home, and it was like, well, who could we get to do that? And I'll do it. Soccer. This area has some great soccer, but you're not going to dedicate one person. So I wrote a lot about soccer when I was younger. I did do a lot about hockey when I was younger. You name it. It was like, hey, women's basketball. Like, what don't we have a specific person to do? And it was, will you do this? And my answer, of course, was always, yeah. I mean, whatever my opportunity was, because I'm not a good writer. I'm more of a I understand sports, and I'm pretty good with numbers. Yeah. So I have those two things going for me, but I'm not. Tudor was an unbelievable writer. Luke DeCock, who's my colleague now, is an incredibly gifted writer. That's not me. I'm more of I could tell a story. Yeah.
Well, you may be selling yourself short. I think I enjoyed everything I read.
I appreciate you.
Yours. You've been covering NC State sports specifically for about how long?
So, in 2000 is when I became a full-time writer, and that was pretty much you name it, I had to do it, and I did it. Yeah. And then in 2004, I came up with the concept of which I don't want to sound like Al Gore, but I came up with the concept of, hey, we should have a blog. We should have a specific online presence that is about the ACC, not just, what we're going to put in print. So I was slightly ahead of my time on that. And so for actually 2 years, I did just general ACC. I went to NCAA tournament with North Carolina, ACC tournament, NC State, did some Duke games. It was a little bit of everything. Football, same. And then the market crashed and the paper kind of crashed, and everybody kind of had to get in and do something specific. And I actually started covering NC State basketball in 2008 specifically. And I covered Carolina football in 9 and 10. And then 11 is when I started covering both state football, basketball. Yeah. So it's kind of been, I always say I've been covering the ACC since 2004.
Yeah. So you've mentioned now a couple times how much the newspaper industry has changed. And I'm sure the newsroom looks and feels a lot different, maybe starting with the fact that there are fewer people, right?
Yeah.
Kind of how has that change impacted you? You talked about being forced kind of to, not forced, but I guess in the end, getting the opportunity to cover NC State more regularly. Can you talk about some of the other changes? And
Sure.
We'll talk about challenges and stuff too.
Yeah, so there's two major ones, right? We were downtown at 215 South McDowell for as long as anyone can remember. And that the printing press was there, the newsroom was there. Now the printing press is actually in Garner. It moved out here.
Out in Greenfield?
Where is it? Yeah, over by the old Slim Jims there. Yeah. So they moved to maybe even 3 years ago now. They moved the printing press out of the building, maybe even 4 years ago. Then we moved out of that space because when I started at the NNO in 95, there were 230 people in the newsroom. In the newsroom. Yeah. So that was editors, writers, the people who put the production staff. Then there was another 200 people on the print side. Yeah, the actual printing press. Press area. Yeah. Okay.
And plus your advertising.
Yeah. That was in addition.
Yeah, in addition.
So
right.
Now we went from 230 in the newsroom to now we're at 52 last year. Yeah. And what had happened, my wife's going to yell at me because I never remember which year. I think it was 12. They laid off our entire nighttime production, which she was a part of. Yeah. And now she's one of two people they've rehired to come back to the newsroom. That was Tim Stevens. Yeah. Had brought her back initially as a part-time. So you went from this, pretty large news gathering organization that was solely specific for print. Even though I started in 95, even though we had a website, you didn't think in terms of what were we going to put on the website. It really wasn't. Humbly, my initiative in 2004 was one of the first times, even at our paper, that we were like, well, what should we do digital first. Like, what can we do? That's not specific to, you have to fill this 12-inch hole in the paper, or you have to write 650 words, you know. So now it's completely flipped, right? You have fewer people, and the print product, we're actually going to stop printing on Saturdays.
Yeah.
We're going to go down to 6 days a week, which is probably not a terrible idea. It should help. But, you know, and our deadlines now, so when I started and worked at night, we had all this stuff, the box scores, the stats.
Yeah.
You had a staff of 4 or 5 people at night who were agate clerks.
Yep.
Then you had a whole desk, the copy edit desk. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And our deadline was 2:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow, late.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
Now, there's days where I have to file by 5:30 p.m.
And that's for web, or is that
No.
to get in the print?
That's
the
to get
next
into
day?
print. Yeah,
Okay.
web is just at the buzzer now.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
You know,
like,
whenever it's done.
there are no deadlines. So
No, it's a very kind of freeing and different, but it's also, you know, it used to be, it was a noon game. Oh, you get 2-3 hours after.
Yeah.
And you can file.
And
And you're on your way. Now it's everything is right at the buzzer. You know, you go back and clean it up and add something to it, but.
Yeah.
No, it's that part of it is really a different mindset, and one as a industry I feel like we relate to embrace, but in the last, I'd say 2 years, McClatchy's done a really much better job of understanding the digital process. And kind of understanding how people consume information now, how they consume content, as we like to call it.
So what, how can sports, it is a new world, and you can talk about what newspapers did right and wrong, and sort of that, the early
Mostly wrong.
2000s, and, kind of giving it away, and then realize, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't have given everything away online. But after you've done it, then you can't really.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah. So what's the way forward, do you think, for news gathering organizations like that? I know that are so essential. I mean, we need them. We need them. Maybe not in the same print format or 7 days a week, like you say, but we certainly we need them. How does sports journalism fit in? How can you kind of help the news gathering organizations transition to the next phase?
I often think about this because I'll have an existential crisis about, well, what do you do with your life, right? You're going to cover this Tuesday night game at 9 o'clock, and who really cares, right? But if you think about it, what if we didn't have sports? Like, what if we didn't have this diversion? It's the same as entertainment. Like, I loved Game of Thrones, and you have this show that you look forward to that doesn't involve your work, right? And I think that's what sports is as an adult. And then we'll talk more about sports here and community sports in Garner. But I feel like as a person who grew up playing sports, when you are younger and as a participant, you learn, okay, well, you're not the star. Maybe you are, but most of the time you're not.
Yeah.
But your team's success, your business's success is dependent upon, okay, I need you to set the screen. We don't win if you don't set the screen.
Right. You're not going to make the game-winning shot.
You're not going to make the shot, but I need you. But I also need you to understand your role.
Yeah.
And I think that's what youth sports is essential for. And I think when it becomes an entertainment product, I also think it's essential in terms of, man, I don't want to think about the TPS report due tomorrow in the office. I don't want to think about, filing my taxes or doing my other, I want to think about, is State going to win? Is Carolina going to win? Is Mike Krzyzewski going to have black hair forever? Like whatever you want to think about. It's a great diversion, particularly in our neck of the woods. They're in Kentucky. They try to act like they have something better than the Triangle, but they don't. Like, there's not 3 schools like this. There's not a history like this.
It is unique.
It's
anywhere.
completely and totally geographically, historically, and to me, that's what makes this area great for sports, and that's what gives me purpose anyway. At least that's what I tell myself when I'm trying to fall asleep, right? Like, what do I do with my life? Does it really matter? That's more of the holistic view of it. I think we have to understand as an industry that people consume, this is how we consume stuff now, right?
Sure.
So if I give it to you here, I got to make it as easy as possible for you to get it here. Twitter has come a long way in helping us do that. I think email is another way that we should do better about. Like, reading the newspaper is a habit. You woke up.
For people of a certain age,
Right,
maybe
over
not so
45.
much. Yeah.
So I'm 40.
Yeah.
I'm turned 45 in 2020. So you had the habit, and what I think we have to realize is, well, what are our new habits? And I think email. One of the first things I do when I wake up, and I don't think I'm unique, is I check my email.
Yeah.
So I always say to people at the paper, is there a way to, if I know, Rick, that you're paying me for my story, why can't I just email it to you and say, here it is. I'm making this as easy as possible for you. And we've done some different things with newsletters that you'll see. But, you mentioned it. When you give away content, and now people are used to content being for free, you have to put a premium on your analysis, on your insight, and incentivize people to say, well, what did Joe say? What did he care about? Yeah. And that's what I've tried my whole career to do, is find a different way to tell the same story that everybody might be there to write, but you have to find a different way to do it. And that's always been one of my biggest challenges.
Yeah. But today, there's so much more that's put on y'all. You're not just writing your stories, filing it for print. You've got a tweet. You're doing at least a weekly video type product. So you're assumed to be these days a multimedia person. It's
definitely different. And now when you write, it used to be we had a copy desk. Somebody wrote the headline for you. Somebody cleaned it up for you. Now it's a little bit like the Wild Wild West. You're putting stuff up, and then you're hoping that you're on your own game there. But I always say to people, and this is the interesting part, and I've dealt with so many different personalities at NC State through the years. And Debbie Yao was their AD for 9 years. And Debbie was one of these people who read the headline or read the cut line of a picture or the summary graph that would be the first thing. And I would always tell her, I didn't write the headline. I didn't write the cut line. I didn't write the summary graph. If you have a problem with anything, those other 700 words, talk to me. But just call me and say, hey. Yeah. But it was always an initial reaction to the headline, and I'm just going. Yeah. And now, though, I am writing the headlines, and it's such a challenge because you pour so much into what you write. Yep. And that's always going to be my process.
Summarize it in 8 words.
Then you're like, oh, now I have to do this other kind of throwaway line where you're like,
except it's not.
It's not, because that's the one somebody.
And you realize,
yes, and
all these years, the copy editors, the headline writers did a valuable service.
They saved me so many times. It's ridiculous. So that was a really big challenge now, because I could write in 10 minutes, but it'll take me 3 times that to sit there and wrestle with the summary and the headline and search engine optimization and oh my gosh, that part. That's for the birds.
What about is there a way for maybe sports journalism to look more at the intersections between sports and society, sports and politics, sports and culture? Do y'all look to do that at the NNO?
We try. I think you want compelling stories, right? I think the part of my original premise is you kind of want this escape from politics, in particular now in this particular environment. I think good stories are good stories, and I think you have to work to find them sometimes. And I feel like anytime you can, I wish I was better at those type of stories. Like you say, culturally or more of a bigger picture. Like, I'm really good at what does it mean to NC State? What is this particular game? My context is my strength. Yeah. And I can probably find a pretty good human interest story too, a good human story. But yeah, I think what we've learned digitally in the last 2 years is people now are more interested in the build-up, the run-up to the game. They'll read 20 stories about the run-up to the game. But the game itself, they want to consume on their terms.
Okay. So the game story is not so important anymore. It's
not.
It's the advanced stuff. Maybe it's post-game analysis.
So that's a strange dynamic to try to, for me at 45, to put my head around, whereas maybe a kid coming up now could be like, oh, well, yeah, you're right, I don't care. I don't necessarily want to follow you on Twitter for the play-by-play, but if something happens where I need to, again, put it in context, I'll come check it out Monday, whatever day you got it. But during the game, that's a big shift for us because online traffic is maximized on Mondays.
Yeah.
Like right now is when people are like, hey, I'm going to catch up with, what's been going on. And Fridays are not great. Saturdays are not great. Yeah. Sundays are better because there's still a little bit of that. Again, you're getting in the habit. I'm going to go check out my computer and go check out the website and see what's going on. But the way we consume content now is just so completely different than what it was even 5 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah. I did want to touch on college sports and the state of, especially the revenue producing sports, because that's something in the news, and you you cover it daily. It's part of your life. I love college basketball especially, and so I love being here in this part of the country. But at times it feels a little icky, right? I mean, certainly we know that State, Carolina have had some issues, and even Duke. The way they more or less rent players for 4 or 5 months, and then they go on to the NBA seems a little eh. Do you have any thoughts about what we should do, especially about those revenue, football and men's basketball?
So to me, you say icky, and that's an institutional thought, right? Because you're thinking, well, this is what I think of as amateur basketball,
right?
And that's fine. I'm not judging you for judging, right? But if you think about it, what's so icky about it, right? Like, not the one and done premise, but if you had a skill at 16 and an agent or a sneaker company says to you, what do you do in real life, Rick? What's your job? You're a communications specialist?
Sure, yeah.
If somebody at 16 said to you, Rick, I think you're a great talker. I think you send a great message. I'm going to pay you $10,000 right now at 16 because I believe when you're 40, 35, 40, 45, you're going to work for me and you're going to make me a lot of money.
Yeah.
You'd be like, yeah, no duh. And if they were like, oh, and by the way, we want you to wear a pullover with our logo on it. And here's another $20,000. You'd be like,
why not?
I'm in.
In every other segment of our capitalist society, that's okay.
Correct.
Right.
And so to me, I don't want NC State to pay you to play basketball. I don't want to see that.
Okay.
But if Adidas says to you, hey, here's Dennis Smith, here's 40 grand. I don't see the problem with that.
Yeah.
Even if you got to NC State and Full Bloom was like, wow, it would be great if we could get Markel Johnson here every week, or Jerome Robinson, kid from Garner, played for Boston College. What if we can get Jerome here once a week and we paid him $500 a week to be, hey, come meet Jerome, come have coffee with Jerome, come talk basketball with Jerome. I don't see a problem with that. That's where we are, name, image, and likeness. That's what, when you hear those three words, that's what that means. That you should be able to cash in on your own name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
And to me, you can't say you can't do something because of what problems it will cause. No matter what you do will have unintended consequences. Yeah. So you can't eliminate an avenue, particularly with the revenue where it is now. Not millions, billions.
Yeah.
With a B.
Oh, yeah.
With a B. So I don't necessarily see it as icky. I see it as a repression. I also, you have to be honest too. The majority of the athletes are black.
Yeah.
The majority of the people making money off of them institutionally are white.
Yes, and the icky part. I mean, maybe I didn't explain
the icky
myself.
Part, true.
Yeah, I think it's.
And I'm not picking on you.
No, I think it's, and that's the part I didn't like. The exploitative aspect of it, and clearly there is a. I mean, you have to acknowledge it. There is a racial overlay there.
Yeah.
that the athletes who are succeeding in these revenue-producing sports are now overwhelmingly or majority African American coaches, administrators at the universities, at the NCAA, all who run the media companies and everything, overwhelmingly. Still
Absolutely.
white,
So
white
it's
guys.
I wish they would. I'm hopeful this latest legislation will allow some of those athletes an
Where's
avenue.
that going? What's this? What?
Well,
I'm not
the
fully
NCAA
up to date.
said they're going to try to come up with a name, image, and likeness legislation by 2021. So we'll see what they kind of come up with. Their hand was obviously forced by the state of California.
Yeah.
And they were also basically told there's, 15 other states ready to do something very similar to what the state of California said, which was you are allowed, like, for example, right now, LeBron James's son is a pretty highly thought of high school basketball player. Well, Nike wants to give him $10,000. Why not? Zion Williamson to me is more of a great example of that. We talked about social media and how it resonates with young kids.
He had a brand before he even stepped on campus.
He had 2 million Instagram followers before he got here. So why couldn't Verizon, things kids care about, crazy old Joe telling you what kids care about, but they care about their phone, So why couldn't Verizon say, Zion, we want to give you $50,000 to put something on your Instagram account about using Verizon phone? I don't see a problem with that, particularly when you have that built-in brand like he had.
Yeah, I mean, I would. That sounds great to me, and great. It sounds like a solution to me that would be fair to the athletes, because like you say, there's a lot of money. Everybody's making it except the young men, and it's the young men. If you're talking revenue sports, they and their families are not seeing any of this cash.
And
unless and until they turn pro.
Right. And there are non-revenue sports, like Katie Ledecky is a great example out in Stanford while she was still in school. She could have sold Speedos. She could have sold whatever. Whatever opportunities are there for Olympic gold medalists. Yeah. That's the path, right? Like when we were growing up, the Olympics were amateur. Mm-hmm. And now they're still amateur, but the swimmer, Michael Phelps. Yeah. You've won all these gold medals. Yeah, you can go sign an Under Armour deal. Yeah, you can go be an endorser and make money on the free market as your brand would allow. So hopefully that's where we're seeing the business go. And the part of it that people lose is it's still a free market. Like, so people are like, every recruit's going to get $1 million. And I'm like, that's not how the free market works. Like, you can think that, but that's not what's going to happen. Right. Like, there's such a thing as return on investment. So, maybe you think Zion's worth whatever, and that's fine.
But Jordan Goldwire, maybe not so much.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm interested to see how it turns out. And I think one concern from big-time athletics is, well, it's going to create a haves and a have-not. Well, we already have that, just so you know. But if you're ECU, for example, and you're allowed to pay somebody, or you're allowed to have an endorsement, like if Sup Dogs was like, hey, I really want to give $20,000 to the quarterback, wouldn't you rather be the number 1 guy at ECU than the number 30 guy at Alabama? Yeah. There's going to be a market for that. And again, the market's going to dictate it. It's not going to be, here, you take this, you take this, you take it. That's not how the world works. Yeah. At least it hasn't till this point.
Well, let's turn to Garner and talk about, Garner has historically been known as kind of a ball town, sports town. Mm-hmm. And you have a couple of sons?
I do.
Is that right? They're involved in sports?
They have been, yeah. My oldest son James is 14. He's a freshman at Garner. Yeah. Big Garner, traditional Garner. Starting his freshman year this year has been really interesting for him. Because my wife and I both work downtown at the paper, so they have been in the magnet system, and they've gone to Washington Elementary and then Moore Square Middle School. So this is his first year in Garner, and I think he's really enjoyed. You're finally going to school with the kids in your neighborhood, and kids you've been playing basketball against, for the last 7, 8, 9 years. Yeah. So he's really kind of embraced that. And then I have a 6th grader, Jackson, who is he's actually down at Carnage, right down Garner Road.
Yeah.
So every morning I spend on Garner Road taking him, and it's been fun. I really I grew up in New Jersey, and I lived 25 miles from the George Washington Bridge, which sounds kind of sort of close, but not up there.
Yeah.
And my dad worked about 40 minutes on a good day away. And so, he was a math teacher, and he lives in Garner now with us in Eagle Ridge. Both my parents do. And he spent so much of his time in a car driving to and from work that I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's not what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
And when I was at NC State and graduated and I was working at the paper, I always said, I don't want to be that far from downtown. And my wife and I got married in 2001. We lived off of Lake Wheeler. And our first house, it was fine. And then we always played golf over at Eagle Ridge and always enjoyed coming over here. And she's like, let's find a house out there. And so we did in '05. And we've been here ever since. And it's been, there's no pretense about Garner.
Yeah.
That's what I like about Garner.
Yeah.
There's an honesty
Yeah,
to
I hope
Garner.
it'll stay that way.
Yeah, there's an honesty to Garner. And I'm an honest person, so I kind of, my favorite people who I deal with on a regular basis are Naheem Hines and Jerome Robinson and Scotty McCreery. So all the Garner legends, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And they each, they all seem to have kind of retained their, remain grounded young men.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your parents are now live here as well?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a phenomenon that we've seen in Garner, maybe other communities, but it's happening a lot in Garner too, where you have sort of multiple generations making their way to Garner. What are the factors that you think bring families to places like this?
I think there's a great home value in Garner, for sure. And again, you're talking about proximity to downtown. To me, I feel like you saw Holly Springs movement, Fuquay. Now all of a sudden you're sitting on 401, and to me, there's no difference between sitting on 401 and sitting on Route 4 in New Jersey. Yeah, and I think I'm 8 miles from work.
That's probably right. Yeah.
And when I go in the morning to drop the boys off at school, there is some old stage traffic that if I could solve that, I can. I feel like I can solve that for the town.
All right.
If they want to listen.
That's another episode. Transportation issues.
I got to get on the transportation podcast for that one. No, but to me, location and just home value. I mean, you get more bang for your buck here for sure, no doubt about it. Particularly this close to downtown.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, that's a good sales pitch for Garner.
I'm here for the G, man.
And you clearly, you give Garner prop. I see that on your Twitter and stuff like that you really seem rooted in the community. I mean, does that seem to be something a little different about Garner? Is that there is kind of this hometown pride that maybe some other unnamed communities in the Triangle don't quite have? I
think so, and I think it's because, like I said, I think there is this direct honesty, and there's also, we're a little bit smaller. I feel like when you're in Raleigh, are you in a different neighborhood? There's definitive neighborhood pride in Raleigh. Don't get me wrong there, but it's still like we're in the Wake County school system, and it's like I have the hardest time explaining to my kids like when it rains or we have like no ice here, but like Wake Forest might have these treacherous back roads where I'm like, well, that's why you don't have school today. And I was here I was in North Carolina. I was in the Triangle when the Capitol Boulevard fiasco where they let kids out that time, and people were like sleeping on the bus, and so I get all of those decisions. And people, the farther we get away from that episode, the more trouble people have understanding why schools are closed so frequently in North Carolina. But it's just such a big. I feel like Wake County is just so big, whereas in Garner, you do have a little bit more of an identifiable area and center and town. I don't like saying town, but it pretty much is.
Yeah. But we still call ourselves a town, not a city or not we're a town. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I know you got to run, and is there anything else you want to say or add, or did we miss? We'll bring you back some other time.
Okay.
Oh, plug your social media.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Plug ours as well.
I am on Twitter. I'll spell it out. JWGIGLIO. At You'll find me there. I'm pretty active there. When I meet people, I'm 45, and when I meet people under like the age of 30, the only way I can impress them is to show them my blue check mark, because most of them, they don't read the paper, right? So they're not like, oh, that's the guy.
They don't know your bio.
They don't know that, but like, we'll have some cousins or whoever come over, and I'll be like, here I am. I'm on Twitter, and they're like,
Shit.
oh, you have a blue check mark, and I'm like,
Yep.
see that? So yeah, for sure, JWGIGLIO on Twitter, and you'll find the yellow pad there.
Yep.
All
And
my
we didn't talk
stats
about
and-
the yellow pad, but yellow pad stats. You're known for that.
That's my thing.
Yep.
Everyone has to have a thing.
What should we do? Like yellow pad for Garner? What would some good yellow pad stats be? I wonder.
Well, let's get the basketball center open.
Let's get that. Let's get that.
Let's get old stage traffic
old
going.
stage fixed, and we'll
But
show how the traffic. counts.
Scotty's #1 songs. I mean, there's a bunch of those. Naheem's touchdowns. I mean,
Yeah.
Jerome is going to probably play for the NBA champions this year. I can't remember the last time Garner had somebody on the NBA champions. So
I guess we can claim David West.
yeah.
So,
he
yeah.
did. You're right.
Yeah.
2 years ago. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, quite a sports tradition here. So we're going to wrap it up, Joe. Thanks for being with us. And you can look for our Garner's Station podcast episodes on our YouTube channel, Town of Garner. You can also listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcast and subscribe. And Joe, thanks for being with us. And
You got it. Appreciate you.
we'll have you back, talk transportation next time. All right.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all. Bye.